Well, doubting evolution is like believing the Earth is flat.
Nice comparative game you're playing here, but it's not working. Actually, doubting Darwinism is like doubting the Earth is flat and recognizing that it's round. The Bible describes the Earth as round and hanging in space anyway. Long before this could have been directly observed. And the four corners and ends of the Earth are figures of metaphorical derogatory terms that people, even scientists, still use today. True Christians have always known the Earth is round. The appeal of this claim is that it stereotypes creationists as stuck in the past, since the common assumption is that people once universally believed the Earth was flat before science proved otherwise. Which wasn't the case. Only a few bought into the flat Earth idea. But even if this were true, though it's not, direct repeatable observation shows us the Earth is round and orbiting the Sun. And the Bible agrees with it just fine. Evolutionary stories about fossils are not direct observations. They're assumption-based beliefs.
We evolved because we were here. We were here, so we must have evolved.
A conclusion does not prove the premises are true. That is, if the answer on a math question is 4, we could arrive at that any number of ways. 2 plus 2, 5 minus 1, etc. In the same way, evolutionists often assume that, since certain species or traits exist, this is proof of evolution, because that's how it must have happened. This argument, however, is self-reflexive and useless. But I assure you, the Bible offers another and more sound framework for how those traits and species came to be.
Natural selection is evolution.
This is likely the most abused argument on the list, and most in need of being scrapped. Often evolutionists draw people into showing them a change that is merely natural selection, and then switch to say this proves to you, evolution. However, this is quite misleading. And I reckon that it shouldn't even have a fancy name like microevolution. It only confuses people. I think the term should be left out, and people just call it a variation. Natural selection, even according to evolutionists, does not have the power to generate anything new. The observable process can only act upon existing characteristics, so that some members of a species are more likely to survive. In fact, it's an important component of the biblical worldview.
You can see the common design in animals. This means common ancestry.
Historical common descent is not, and cannot be confirmed through observation. Rather, certain observations are explained by assumptions about the past. These observations, we might add, have alternative explanations. Common body plans, homology, for example, do not prove common descent. That's an assumption. A common designer fits the evidence just as well, if not better. Just like an iPod and an iPhone appear to have common design, but that doesn't mean one evolved from the other because of hardware glitches. But because we have a thorough knowledge of history, we know that the same company designed both of them. And I'd say that the Bible is the only perfect key to the past, since it's not just a book of do's and don'ts, and apart from all the clearly superstitious unscientific religious books of the world which profess some really silly and strange things, you can find that it's historically, geographically, customarily, culturally, spiritually, significantly, conversationally, scientifically, and diary and letterly accurate.
Don't be a fool. Those sedimentary layers show millions of years of geological activity.
Again, you're assuming that what we see today is how it's always been happening in the past. I encourage you to put away your nihilism once and for all. But sedimentary layers only show one thing. Sedimentary layers. In other words, we can and should study the rocks, but the claim that rocks prove the Earth must be billions of years old ignores one important point. Such an interpretation is built upon a stack of assumptions. When we start from the Bible and examine the rocks within the framework of a global flood, the need for long ages vanishes. During a global flood, all those sedimentary layers could have easily been sorted out by color, density, and so on. Hydrolytic sorting. And there is continuous proof that they were laid down rapidly. For example, the very existence of freeze-position fossils, like a bigger fish beginning to eat another fish, screams out the fact that it was a rapid burial. Not over eons of time burial.
Well, mutations drive evolution.
Perhaps because you've been watching too many movies, the popular idea is that mutations make evolution go. The saying, given enough time, shifts in the genetic code will produce all the variety of plants and animals on Earth and beyond. The problem? Mutations cannot produce the types of changes evolution requires. Not even close. Some may benefit an organism, like beetles on a windy island losing wings, but virtually every time mutations come with a cost. The simple fact is that, while evidence is clear about common descent, however, it is also pretty clear that the great diversity of life we see on Earth cannot be explained under Darwinian evolution. That is, any serious look at the evidence would lead to the conclusion that random mutation does not explain how we have evolved. Our genetic structures are so complex, and this complexity simply could not have occurred through random processes during the 4.6 billion year life of the Earth. There is one conclusion that we can learn from mutations. They are harmful. And they fit in quite well with the creation framework, that they are part of the whole curse of sin that has affected the whole universe. It's observable. Things are getting worse, not better.
Well, the idiot William Jennings Bryan already failed at the Scopes trial. I don't understand why we were still having this argument today.
Misconceptions about the Scopes trial run rampant. Often, accounts sound something like this. Fundamentalist Christian bigots arrest an innocent biology teacher fighting for scientific freedom, and while they won the court case, they ultimately lost the public perception battle to the well-reasoned presentation of the defense. Thanks to the biased Hollywood fantasy Inherit the Wind, this common though completely flawed perception of the event continues to be used against creationists. But real history presents a much different account. Study history, and don't let a socialist bias Hollywood fool you. William Jennings Bryan failed at the Scopes trial simply because he didn't know the reasonable answers and apologetics that creation scientists and apologists have today. The argument is not over, and please don't use that failure back then as an excuse to not listen to the creation side after all, especially if you are going to be continuously and fervently thirsty for answers, which have diligently been answered for you for years and years. And I'd say that Bryan and the creationists actually did indeed win at the trial, because they were continuously loving to the end toward their enemies. The Darwinists in that debate were apparently the ones being bigoted and malicious.
Okay, well then I'll leave that movie out if it's really a big parody. But remember, the issue has been and will always be science versus religion.
News stories thrive on conflict and intrigue, and one common meme presents science and religion as opposing forces. Reason struggling to overcome draconian divine revelation. It grabs attention, but it's nonsense. Many atheists and humanists oppose biblical Christianity, but science does not. After all, the truth of a risen Savior and an inerrant Bible puts quite the damper on the belief that God cannot exist. However, science, as a tool for research, works quite well within, and in fact, requires a God-created universe. Otherwise there'd be no reason to do science in the first place. And please don't give me any of that, science flies you to the moon. Religion flies you into buildings. There's some historical background you're not getting. Most branches of science were started by Christians. Werner von Braun was a creationist. 9/11 was caused by Illuminati Satanists. You may offend someone really bad if you try to profess they believe the same stuff. They don't. But I dare say that religion kills Christians. Christians are basically the ones always being persecuted and killed. And the word religion should not be used to blacklist Christians. They've left religion. Actually, the battle is not between science and religion per se, otherwise you'd expect all scientists to be atheists. But they're not. It is worldview versus worldview. Both creation and evolution are faith-based. You have to believe either one. And it's best that people in school are introduced to both sides of the argument in order to get a proper education, because from a basic perspective, they are both worldviews used to interpret the evidence around them. That kind of education will be helpful to avoid indoctrination, and students can decide for themselves which side to take. It's best to be educated in how to think, not being told what to think. As I've encountered much people like that. But when prayer was thrown out of public schools, when the Bible, 10 Commandments, nativity scenes, Pledge of Allegiance, prayer in the classroom, they didn't throw out religion. They just threw Christianity out and replaced it with a new religion called evolution, a pseudoscience. And as far as anyone knows, the public schools have become churches of humanism.
Very interesting. You Christian apologetics really give some of the most reasonable logical answers for the world's frequently asked questions. I will see you later, and I hope that we can talk again.
I appreciate that, friend. For more Christian apologetics, go either to drdino.com or answersingenesis.org.